All right, I think we're live. It's always interesting. Can't really tell. Can you guys see on YouTube?
Oh, I don't have YouTube up. Let me open that one
Here
too.
we are. Nope,
We are
it's
live.
working. It's always interesting when you're trying to see how these things work. So, well, that's an auspicious start right there. So I'm Nate Adams, CEO of HVAC 2.0. And there's a bunch of us here tonight. And we are going to be talking about ventilation and sucking and blowing and things that probably sound better than they actually are. So we're going to run this a little bit different. So last week was totally different format from normal. This week is going to be closer to regular format, where we're going to talk about something technical, and then we're going to look at some actual projects. Then we'll have a discussion afterwards. So, please leave comments, ask questions, and I'll either let you know, hey, we're going to deal with that later, or deal with it then, or push it to the end, or whatever. So we'll work through it. But we want to challenge a lot of thinking on fresh air ventilation, mechanical ventilation. And to do that, I didn't know how to do it without a slide deck, because it's a lot. There's a case that has to be built. So that's what we're going to do for the first half an hour or so. And then we're going to go from there. But like I said, please ask questions and comment, stuff like that. Okay. So here we are. Spaceballs. If you have an inner 13-year-old, watch this movie. It's really funny. I mean, Mel Brooks, he's coming out with another movie here shortly. It's The History of the World Part 2. The dude's like 94, and he's still coming out with fart joke humor, which is great. So it's this 93-year-old Jewish dude with a little boy that lives inside of him. But why I pulled this up, if anybody's seen the movie, the bad guys here are called the Spaceballs, and they're just idiots. And they have used up all of their air on their planet, so they're going to go steal somebody's air. And this is the scene. So they make this huge robot where it's a transformer. The dumb spaceship turns into Mega Maid, and they start sucking it out, and then this happens.
Sanders, what's going on? It's Mega Maid. It's gone from suck to blow. What? They're getting all their air back. Do something. Do something. Do something. I'm scorched.
That gives you a flavor for the movie right there. But anyway, we're going to be diving into ventilation on different fronts. So tonight, we need to basically set up all of the groundwork to cover the rest of the stuff. One of the biggest things being showing that every house needs ventilation. So this week, we're talking basics. Next week, case against ERVs. The week after that, ventilating dehumidifiers. Then pressurization. And then reheat dehumidification, which anybody who knows me knows that I have a love affair there. So as we get started, let's talk about what we call sweet spot thinking. So my partner TK and I have been talking for years about this S-shaped curve, where the first couple of things you do don't really move the needle, and then things start to happen fast. And then after a little while, they taper off. So what we're always trying to figure out is, what is the sweet spot to solve a problem? What's it going to take where we have a good chance of actually fixing stuff, but we're also proposing something that somebody might actually buy? And so actually fixing stuff is what we call it. So the sweet spot is right here. And that is where spending more money doesn't necessarily make any sense. So over here, this is getting into your odds of success, odds of results. So you want to get at least over 80%, I think we can all agree, and preferably over 90 if possible. And on the bottom, this is work that you do or money that you spend. And the problem is, most jobs are chasing the low-hanging fruit. So if you've ever heard me say, I hate low-hanging fruit and that whole concept, this is why. We've watched low-hanging fruit not work so many times that it just frustrates us. It's a bad way to do things. So on the top end of the curve here, where we're approaching perfection, the curse is no one actually does this work. you see all kinds of spirited debates where people are arguing over specification sheets over whether this will actually happen or not. But then nobody actually sells or does the project, so it doesn't matter. It's just a pointless conversation, really. If you can find something with decent odds that isn't insanely expensive and you can offer it to a client to solve problems they care about, some clients will do it. Not all of them, but some will. And then if you live in this bottom area, you oftentimes end up doing bad work that makes things worse, or it needs to be redone. And this corresponds to the kind of crummy stuff is oftentimes what traditional solutions lead you to. HVAC 2.0 is aiming to hit this middle section where we're actually making a difference, but some people will actually buy it. And over here, we'll explain this later, but we call that an HP bonehead. All right, so here's what we're actually going to dive into tonight. So number one, fresh air is defined as filtered and dry. Second thing is every house needs fresh air because stank. Then we'll talk about sucking and blowing at the same time, and then we'll have a discussion. So to start about fresh air really ain't fresh in a lot of cases. So this is the filter from a 6-week-old ventilating dehumidifier install that's 1,000 feet away from a highway in Cleveland. Look how dirty this is. That filter is only 6 weeks old. It hasn't been working that long. And then look at the rest of the house air that's been going through it. There's almost nothing. So if you're going to bring in outdoor air, you really need to filter it. And we say that fresh air needs to be filtered and dry because 80% of the US lives here on the eastern side of the country where we have humidity. And we're actually getting more humidity. It's lasting longer. And average dew points are up quite a bit, like 3 to 5 degrees since 1950. So there's a lot more humidity to deal with. I did a presentation 2018 at the Healthy Building Summit called The Coming Mold Explosion. Well, it's not coming, it's here. We've seen all kinds of crazy stuff. So think hard on dehumidification, and particularly with fresh air coming in. But if you live out west, you're not off the hook because you have wildfires. So you need to have really good filtration capability if you're going to bring outdoor air in, and it's a good idea to bring some outdoor air in. Good for indoor air quality. And this is what we'll dive into a bit more later, but do shoulder seasons equal stank? But before we dive into all that, it's important to think about, do we have fresh air? And the only way to know that is to measure. And in 2016, a bunch of inexpensive air quality monitors started hitting the market. So this is my living room table back in 2016 with a whole bunch of monitors that I either borrowed or bought, trying to figure out what worked and what didn't and understand things. So I actually beat Lawrence Berkeley National Labs to a comparison test between devices like this. And it was really interesting finding the strengths and weaknesses of these things, but also understanding when an event happened, what happened, like what was going on. And it was a really interesting learning experience. So you don't all have to do this, but just know that we've spent some time doing that. Our favorite currently is the Haven monitor, and this is in duct. So if you see it over here, it stabs into the ductwork. But there's actually one in this house where I'm sitting. This is one of our Airbnbs. This is called the Game House. But what I love about this product is it will also control air quality. Until now, all of the air quality monitors are like car alarms going off on the street where you're like, will somebody please shut that thing off? It would tell you something was wrong, but you couldn't really do anything with that information. There was no way to have it trigger something. This actually helps you trigger. And I have 2 fresh air intakes on this house. One's open almost all the time, and then the other one triggers when VOCs get high. Okay, so let's build a case that every house needs fresh air. So this is what we have found. And this chart here, this is hourly temperature bins for Cleveland, Ohio. So we now live in West Virginia, but I lived for over 40 years in the Cleveland area, so I'm used to it there. And this is the number of hours that Cleveland spends in these various 5-degree temperature bins. So 750 hours is roughly a month. 30 days is 720 hours. So we spend about a month in Cleveland in the 30 to 35 degree range, and also about a month in Cleveland in the 65 to 70 degree range. So that gives you an idea of how to read this chart. And if you look at the fat part of the curve here, it's actually pretty moderate temperatures. So this is a reasonably cold climate. Cleveland is climate zone 5. Design temperature is 5 degrees. And we spend about half the year in temperatures that are both moderate and humid. I mean, once you get temperatures over 55 or 60 degrees, you have the potential for dew points over 55 or 60, and that's where things start happening. And if you want to dive into this more, if you go to natethehousewhisperer.com, a big chunk of my book is available for free. The Home Comfort book, you can download chapters and go take a look at that part. You have to buy actually the chapter that has this one, and it's on sizing. So seeing that half the year is relatively moderate in temperatures, the next step to look at is shoulder seasons and stack effect. Now, to get flow, you don't just need a hole, you need a hole and pressure. And this is the challenge that we have in shoulder seasons. So if you think of a boat and pressure, if you have a hole above the water line, is that going to leak much? No, there's hardly any pressure. So only when a wave laps up over it is any water going to come in. So you're not going to get a lot of flow. If you drill a hole right at the water line, you're going to start getting some leaks. Like that can be enough to sink the boat, but you might be able to deal with the bilge pump. But if you drill a hole in the bottom of the boat and it starts splashing up like that, that thing's going down quick because there's a lot of pressure on that hole. Houses work the same way. Something called stack effect. So smokestacks flow more the taller they are and the higher the temperature that you put in them. And houses work the same way. Tall houses leak more, and the colder it is, the larger the temperature difference, the more stack effect you get. And winter stack effect's really easy to picture in your mind. Cold air comes in through the bottom, through any leaks, and then it rises up through the house and comes out. And the more extreme the temperature, the faster this happens. And this is why leaky houses have pretty high load calcs. And it's not just a linear thing. If you have a tight house, it's pretty linear. But if you have a loose house, you'll notice that the loads go up very quickly when it gets very cold out. So, but that's winter. But we're not talking winter. We're talking shoulder seasons. We're talking the half the year when there's only 10, 15, 20 degree difference between inside and outside. So not that much. So we don't have a lot of pressure. So this is kind of what it looks like here. So if you have a 2-story house, it can flow more versus a 1-story. But if there's very little temperature difference between inside and outside, you're not going to have much flow at all. So what that means is no temperature difference, no pressure, no flow, no outdoor air, and that leads to stank. So let's try and avoid the stank, shall we? And the other thing is, if you're in a humid climate, moderate temps lead to little cooling load. If it's 72 degrees out, like it was here today, oddly enough, but the dew point's 65 degrees, you still got some latent work to do. So there's lots of latent, but there's almost no sensible cooling load to do. So that also leads to stank. Today was remarkable. I checked the dew point. It was 32 degrees. I've never seen a 32 degree dew point on a 70 degree day. Never seen it, but I don't normally see 70 degree days in the middle of winter either. So you can have that. And again, if you want to dive more into this, this is actually in the first chapter of the book, Comfort 101. So does that make sense that all houses, even leaky ones, are going to need fresh air because you've got a lot of shoulder seasons where they just sit, nothing moves. There's no pressure to run leakage through those holes. So now we can actually dig into the ventilation side of things. And so there are 3 strategies for fresh air ventilation or mechanical ventilation, whatever you want to call it. So there's suck, blow, and suck and blow. And I find these way easier in my head to think of. But they're also known as, suck is called depressurization, blowing is called pressurization, and sucking and blowing is called balanced. So those are your usual names that you're going to hear. So if you're on Green Building Advisor, that's what they're going to call it. I just assume called suck and blow, thanks. So examples of this, if you're sucking, like a bath fan is sucking on the house. An easy breathe, I don't know if anybody's seen these things in a basement. This is like the worst idea known to man. let's suck on the basement so that it pulls air into the coldest space in the house in summer so that we get condensation and then, oh yeah, mold. Like, I've seen these things coated with mold because it's condensing on them. Like, yeah, it's not good. Blowing, your common things are going to be a fresh air duct coming in from outside. I didn't put it on here, but you could have a fan assisted a duct coming from outside. Like Tanner, you would use that down south because you can't put the fresh air in before the filter because you've got filter grills in the living space. And then the other common thing here would be a ventilating dehumidifier. So this is where you're putting air in, but then you're letting it find its way out wherever it can in the house. And then balanced is an ERV or an HRV. So energy recovery ventilator or heat recovery ventilator. These are basically like a radiator in your car, but they're air to air. So the pros of each one of these strategies: sucking is cheap and easy. Sounds like another joke is coming, but I'll spare you all. Blowing can be inexpensive if you're just talking running a duct outside. Ventilating dehus, not inexpensive, but we found that it tends to be very effective. And sucking and blowing at the same time are very good for higher volumes. So if you have a higher occupancy space, say you have 10 kids or something like that, somebody comes to mind in the industry, actually 2, Reedy here as well. And so if you have a lot of people coming or that are staying in the house, you may need more flow. Or if it's a commercial space, you may need more flow. But most homes are going to have like 2 to 5 people. So you don't necessarily need that much flow. Now, the cons are sucking is ineffective and it sucks from bad places. And we'll get to that more in a minute here. Blowing, if you are humidifying a building, you can wet the building in winter. So you want to be cognizant of that. That's the potential downside there. And of balanced, you're going to have some latent challenges. This is how we learn to not like ERVs. We put one in one of our client homes and we could not control the humidity in that house. It went totally out of control. I had to turn down the speed, and sometimes we had to turn it off to even get control. So ERVs do not dehumidify. They only reduce how much they add. So you're still adding latent that you have to deal with. They also are going to steal budget. So pick your poison on what you're going to charge for them: $4,000, $10,000. If it's a full duct system, it might be 15. Like, who knows? Whole range of stuff here. But that is budget that can't be used for other things. And I would much rather get a high-end inverter piece of equipment and a duct going outside than single stage equipment and a ERV. So that's how we look at it. And then you're also adding an extra piece of maintenance. So is anyone here seeing that the only guaranteed level of maintenance we can count on homeowners doing is 0? So let's add more equipment and more things to change and more maintenance. Sounds great. And I think all of us have seen some crummy ones, and we'll get to that next week, actually. So, but still, every house needs fresh air. And so if we know that now, and I'm sorry, I have now put knowledge in your minds that you didn't have earlier. So if you don't apply this knowledge unapplied is useless. If a doctor knows how to save someone, but chooses not to save them, that's useless. That's worse than useless. That's negligence. But it's if we know something, we need to be at least offering it to people and making them aware that they have that option. If they are aware of the option and they don't choose it, that's on them. So Joe's going to love this slide. So this is Joe Stiebrick. It looks like the Stiebrick. It's Stiebrick. So this is Dr. Joe. He is the principal at Building Science Corporation in Boston. He is a Canadian who was almost told not to come back. He's got a mouth on him, we'll just say. But what I love about Joe is he goes out and he looks at actual projects and sees things that break and learns why, and then teaches the rest of us why. And when he learns things that contradict what he had learned before, he writes about it and changes his mind. So he's doing really good science. I really like Joe. Architects hire him all the time, and he just beats the crap out of architects. Like, he's just mean. I've gone to see him as he talks to architects, and he's just like, "Ooh, dude, that was harsh." But this is a very slight paraphrase of Dr. Joe. Sucking sucks. So let's talk about why, and then we'll look at a couple of articles of his that you might want to go read. So this is a great picture from Stephan Peter Contess in Nashville. So he was in a crawl space. The flex duct there, that's a return duct that fell off. It fell into a dirt crawl space. McGrath says he's a perfect gentleman. That's your definition. I love him though. Don't get me wrong. So this return duct fell down, and now this is sucking air into the house that this family was breathing right next to a dead possum. Well, that's okay because you're just picking up. I mean, that's dirt, and I'm sure there's some mold. Nothing in there that's bad. And whenever you are sucking on a house, this is the kind of stuff that you're sucking on. I mean, I don't know if anybody has opened up a wall cavity, but I've seen a lot of mold in wall cavities when you take them apart. And if you are sucking on a house, you're pulling air in or you're blowing air out, and then you're forcing the air to come in wherever it can. It's coming in through bad places. Every attic that I have sucked out has been full of animal crap. You're breathing that. You can have a dirt crawl space like this. You're breathing that. You can have a basement that has some stuff in there. You're breathing that. Sucking sucks. Like, you want to know where your air comes from.
It's the STDs of houses. You got a little mold, fuzzy stuff on the outside. You don't want to suck on that. It's going to make for a bad day.
Yeah. It's wear your rubber. Everybody's got to walk around with an N95 in their house. So here's a couple of articles to go take a look. Joe is a wonderful writer. He's very funny. He's technically correct. So this is called Unintended Consequences Suck. And the end of this talks about how sucking sucks, blowing is better, sucking and blowing is best. So for this article, he is talking about multifamily. And in multifamily, balanced is what you want. Because if you are cooking Indian food and you're pressurizing that space, you're going to be pushing those smells into your neighbors, and they're not going to be happy. So for multifamily, yes, balance makes a lot of sense. For single family, in general, pressurization is our preference by far. Here's another one. I love this line. First deal with the manure and then don't suck. Check out this German dude's line. If there's a pile of manure in a space, do not try to remove the odor by ventilation. Remove the pile of manure. So that's source control. If you got something bad in the house, get it out. So that's step one always. And be careful what you bring in. Like furniture can bring in all kinds of nasty stuff. Like new car smell is formaldehyde. Hate to break it to y'all, but that's usually what it is. Smells great. I love it too. Nothing like a new car. New leather seats. Love it. But you don't want to suck on the space. And then the last line, or one of the last lines in the article. So here's just typical Joe for you. Stupid should hurt. It should hurt the stupid person. Unfortunately, it hurts most of us who are not stupid. And what he's talking about here are all the rules that we have to follow because we're trying to deal with people being stupid. Like McDonald's cups having, warning, hot, don't spill in your lap, you idiot, because they got sued. We would generally prefer for Darwin to just do his thing. And then the third one to take a look at is the pressure is on. And this is an article about a hospital problem where it turned out one of the ducts was sucking from inside of a wall cavity that had gotten wet and it was moldy. And it unfortunately led to the death of a few people with aspergillus mold. So not good, but positive pressures beat negative pressure. Blowing is often more useful to suck than sucking. So in what we're saying here, understand that like nothing is absolutely hard yes or hard no. There's a spectrum of things, but there's some things that you're going to use much more often. That said, can we all agree to take sucking off the table of the three strategies? Sucking sucks. Now, there's a big exception, which is local. So if you have a kitchen, you should have a range hood vented outdoors because all sorts of bad stuff is generated on the stove. You're combusting food. If you have a gas stove, you're combusting gas. Like you wouldn't put your face in the tailpipe of your car, but that's kind of what you're doing with the stove. So it's good to vent that outside. And then in bathrooms, humidity is a real challenge. vent the bath fan outside so that you can suck most of the steam from the shower out, or other odors, shall we say. So this is the question that we've really tried to figure out, how can we answer? So how do we deliver fresh air to every house? We're never going to do this, but we can think about how to do it to more. And so this is the technology adoption curve. So whenever something new comes out, like I had satellite radio and GPS in 2004. I'm an early adopter on a lot of things. Indoor air quality monitors, early adopter. Energy monitors, early adopter. This is shiny land. I totally can be distracted by shiny objects. But what we really care about is the mass market, where this is where most of the demand happens. And so that's what we want to think about, the fat part of the bell curve, that part of demand curve. And really what this comes down to is, what is the best mid-priced system that we can install? So is there something we can do that gives fresh air effectively, but doesn't cost so much that it prices it out of every install? And this is where pressurization can be really nice. And we do this, and if anybody's been following me for long, if you haven't heard this, let me know. I'm going to have to come over and smack you. Offer and decline. So what we do consistently in HVAC 2.0 is we educate homeowners, and then we offer them options. And then rinse and repeat. You just keep going down the line, and they keep choosing their own adventure as they go. And when you do that, if you give them options and they choose something, who owns the results of that choice? They do. You just responsibly avoided responsibility, which is what we want to do the whole time. You're still going to have to own some responsibility, but you don't want to get bit for stupid stuff. And I don't know if anybody's seen American Beauty. I love this scene where Kevin Spacey quits his job. He's got like a good sales job, and he quits it and he goes to flip burgers. And they're like, "Do you want to be the manager?" I'm looking for the least possible amount of responsibility. We want to do it responsibly, but don't take responsibility that you don't have to. If you aren't getting paid and you don't have control over outcomes, don't take responsibility. You're going to get bit. Maybe not this time, but you will sometime. So be careful. So here's how this works. This is in the very soon to be released free quote process within the HVAC 2.0 software. And you can offer different installation choices. And anybody can feel free to borrow this. Like, that's fine too. So we compare what the different systems do to the 6 functions of HVAC. I'm just showing 2 of them here, filtration and fresh air. So the basic install, because you're going to have them looking for what's the cheap apples to apples, the crappy install with a single stage crappy system, as cheap as you can buy. This is going to be it. They're going to get their 1-inch filter back, and they're going to get a downgrade because it sucks. And they have a frowny face on filtration and fresh air. I showed this to a friend of mine, and he's like, "I am offended you would even try to sell me that." And I'm like, "John, that's what you have. That's what's in your house." And like 85% of houses have that. So it was effective on that. He wouldn't have chosen that now, would he? So the good system, at least you go to a media cabinet, and now you get filtration, but there's still no fresh air. So it's still frowny. The better system, 4-inch MERV 13 and a 6-inch duct to outdoors. Now you have some outdoor air. May or may not be great, but you've got some. And now you've got better filtration, and you've at least got some outdoor air. And nearly perfect, you can run a ventilating dehumidifier, or like on this house, we ran 2 outdoor air ducts with dampers controlled by a Haven. And that keeps the air quality in these 2 Airbnbs remarkably good. So this is what it looks like to do the offer and decline. And this is built into the software. So we're not taking new people at the moment. We will soon. But we are taking the rough edges off of it still. Probably in about a month, we'll be ready. And then I want to touch on what the process looks like. So fundamentally, the 2.0 process answers 2 questions. The first question is, are there comfort problems to solve? And if no, and we do this by asking 4 questions. It's, do you have any rooms that don't heat well? Any rooms that don't cool well? Does anybody have respiratory challenges? And are there any moisture issues? And it's a scale of 0 to 10. Again, built into the software. You can send your clients the form. They will fill out the quiz, and then they get given custom videos based on what their scores are. But a lot of people, about 70%, are going to say, no, there's nothing I want to fix. Great. You do a free quote, you like for like it. You give them their different options for equipment levels and installs. Good to go. But for the 30% or so that say, yes, there are problems that are worth trying to figure out, you run them through a comfort console. And this is where you ask and answer the second question. Is HVAC alone likely to solve the problems that they have in their home? We have been really surprised how many homes can be substantially fixed by right-sized variable speed equipment. But you need to be aggressive. Can't mess around. If it comes in, at 32,000, don't put a 4-ton in. You might even need to do a 2.5 or a 2-ton, something like that. You're going to need to be aggressive to really make it work. But then some houses are going to be really screwed up, and you need to go further and figure out exactly what they need. And we have a process for that. This is maybe 1 or 2%. This is almost nothing. And you can, frankly, set the price high on it so that not many people take you up on it. But this is the basics of the process. And what we find is this sells a lot of really nice equipment at high closing rates. And I think everybody here can nod along on that one.
And which something to kind of add to that last one, if anyone has ever been in a situation where you get some new tools and you're like, oh, well, I'm going to be the one that goes out and test everything. And, and you're trying to show up somebody, if you're working with somebody or the homeowner's right there, you go and you do all this testing. And then just to find out that nothing changed had you have not done any of the testing, like you didn't learn anything special to where what you were going to actually do is any different. This is kind of a way to kind of get away from that. Because, especially when you start doing a lot of testing because you're trying to do better, if you do that and then nothing actually changes and you don't see anything actually being better having for it, is going to be very discouraging. So with the A path versus B path, it's kind of, okay, well, you want to be able to do testing when you need to actually do better work. You're just offering it in a way to where you're actually doing it meaningfully. You're not just doing it just whenever to stroke your ego to make yourself feel better. You're actually going to get stuff done. And so that's kind of the mindset that you kind of have to look at this type of thing. It's really, do you want to stroke your ego and make yourself feel better and be like, hey, look, Joe that's working with me, look how cool I am. I can test something that means absolutely fucking nothing. Or you can actually utilize it in a way to where you can solve problems. You can do things to where it actually leads to really good outcomes and you actually get paid for it. You don't have to sit and try to, convince Miss Homeowner, this is why I got to do, a blower door test with a true flow grid and a duct blaster running all at the same time to do this fancy little test that I come up with in my backyard because this seems like it's going to work great. It's an actual way of being practical with this kind of stuff.
Don't be the stupid person.
Don't be
the just said.
Yes. Don't be the stupid person that Joe was talking about in that article.
Don't make us write rules so that we can try and save you. Exactly. So this is meant to be back to the S curve, the sweet spot thing. What this process is trying to do is figure out what the sweet spot is for every client in every house, because it's never going to be the same. Tanner, you and I could own your house and we would come up with different solutions because we've got different preferences and what we want. May not be a lot different, but I bet we'd choose something a little different. So that's the basics of the process. 2.0 itself, the way to think of it is in 3 parts. So it's a software-backed process. The easiest way to think of this is it's a really narrow path to walk to actually responsibly avoid responsibility. It's really easy to fall off the path. All of us have screwed stuff up and then we've got to figure out how to rescue ourselves. So this is like going bowling and where you pull up the bumpers for your kids so that at least they can't gutter ball. The software basically keeps you from doing a gutter ball and it keeps you on path. That's what it is. But it's fundamentally, it's the process that you're following. It's also an ethos. An ethos it's a way of thinking. It's a whole way that a given culture acts. And you've probably noticed that we act oftentimes a lot different than other folks because we're trying to come at problems in a very different way. So there's a very different way to look at things and look at the world. And then there's the guild, which you're also seeing here. So we all help each other out because you're going to bump into situations and whatnot where you don't know what to do, or you just get like the classic thing. If you had friends when you were younger and you could tell that a girl liked him but he's like, I don't know, like, dude, she likes you. Just go ask her out. Sometimes you need the outside. Rich, yeah, it'll be archived. It'll be on YouTube. Timmy, let me let you in here, bud. There we go. Ted got you in. Sweet. So those are the 3 parts. What those end up letting you do is you can fix literally any client problem predictably and profitably. You may need some extra help for the really hard ones, but we started by doing the really difficult projects. If you go to EnergySmartOhio.com, you can look at the case studies that we did. Pretty crazy. And if you want to learn this or just work on shifting mindset so you can solve more complex problems, these are 3 books that I really like. So on the process, 2.0 is based on the Sandler sales process, which if you ever feel like you're selling, you're doing it wrong. And I hate the title of this book, but this is the one to start with. You can't teach a kid to ride a bike at a seminar. Hero on a Mission. I just finished this one. I really like it. It helps you figure out how to be more of a guide than a hero to your clients. You don't want to be the hero. We are the heroes in our own lives. We are not the heroes in other people's lives. We have no control over other people. We only have influence. We only have control over ourselves. And if you try to take too much control, you're going to get bit. And this helps kind of put a framework around that. And then Tanner, thank you for recommending Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. So these are some great books to put on while you're driving around. This is good windshield time stuff. You can read them if you want, but I don't read nonfiction. I never finish them. And then just kind of a call to action at the end of this. Go measure stuff. Buy an air quality monitor. Figure stuff out. Get a couple of them so you can compare against each other. There's an Emporia View energy monitor there. Energy monitors with this capability were $1,000 6 years ago. This is $160. So you can get that. And then the other one is an Ecobee screenshot of the Home IQ, which lets you see runtime. And that's one of the best ways to actually understand what load is on a house. So we tackled all that. Fresh air is filtered and dry. Every house needs fresh air because stank, suck, and blow, and then discussion. So this is the intro. We've made it through that. Next up, we'll be talking about the case against ERVs. You may hear a lot of, lots and lots of people recommend ERVs. We seldom do, and we'll explain why. Next up is ventilating dehumidifiers, which we have a love-hate relationship with. I have one myself, but there's times to use them and times not to use them, so we'll talk about that. Then we'll talk about pressurization and what that actually looks like, and if we are basically blowing up a house. And then we'll finish with reheat dehumidification. And that'll be the series. And the week after that, I'm on vacation. So you all can have a regular discussion instead of me running through a freaking slideshow. I told y'all I didn't want to do this, and here I am doing it. So anyway, points of discussion, ask questions, and what have you all learned from doing mechanical ventilation? What types have you done? Like how many fresh air systems have you installed? What did you learn from that? Are you using any air quality monitors, and what have you learned? So just a couple of things to start with.
Yeah, I think it really, if people just starts doing it, that's really just what it needs to be. Just, and depending on where you're at, like in my area, it's not very difficult, honestly, to just run a fresh air scuttle to your return to a lot of systems. And so if you're already, especially if it's a house that, let's say it's an existing house, it's never had heating and air, or maybe it had window units and wall gas heaters or something, and you're going in all new anyways, at that point, since you're already in the design phase, it's not difficult to go ahead and just incorporate that because it's fairly inexpensive. Like, I feel like a lot of people have not done it in the past simply because you see, people saying, oh, well, you need to use ERVs, you need this, you need that. And when you start actually looking at the numbers of how much this costs, and you have a homeowner that's like, I don't really care that much, they're not going to want to spend $4,000 or $5,000 for something that they're not going to actually notice a difference right out the gate. They're just going to be like, why the fuck did I have this? Like, the whole point of fresh air is to prevent from noticing. Like, if it works great, they should never notice. And so that's a good place to kind of start. Now, where it kind of gets, I feel like it gets a little more complicated is when you're actually trying to solve a problem. You know, if you're going out to a house and you're not the typical, you know, knuckle dragging waterhead that's just going to throw UV lights and PCOs and ionizers into ductwork and think we're going to solve problems, well, then you're actually going to have to address the source. And so it's when you start trying to address that source, you know, bring in fresh air, actually do some source control, it can get a little tricky. But before you get to that point, you kind of need to get your feet wet. Like, you kind of need to get a feel for it. And that's where the actual testing and monitoring comes in handy. Like, if you start using a Haven and Ecobee, if you just use those two things and start seeing how houses work, I mean, that'll open yourself up to so much stuff to be like, holy shit, I didn't realize, you know, that I didn't realize systems were so oversized. Having now looking at this Ecobee, and then I didn't realize, you know, certain types of families for certain houses tend to have really high VOCs or PM, you know, using this Haven. And so you start kind of getting a grasp of patterns, and that's really a lot of it is pattern recognition. And then when you start utilizing some fresh air, I mean, just one little variable, and then you can see how that impacts things. I mean, it's something that should be the norm, but we're not there yet.
No, we're not. And yeah, I'll give a third shout out for the Haven, because they've got that nice little controller that has dry contacts on it, and you can run a bunch of them. So I don't know that it's limited, but I think you can run as many as 10 different dry contacts. So if you want to do a science experiment on your house, you can. And you can begin to understand what works. You know, trigger the air handler, various speeds, kick the AC. If you put multiple scuttles in, you can try that. You can turn on the dehue. Like, there's all kinds of things that you can try and play. Because I don't know if that many people know this, but I have basically no formal education in this. I have a week of BPI training, and I have about a week and a half of weatherization training. That's what I've got. Everything else has been learned by going out in the field and then spending time on forums and learning and figuring stuff out. So you can intuit all of this stuff. I'm proof. I don't have a background in HVAC. I didn't really have a background in insulation. I just fumbled my way through all of this stuff. But the more you can dive into fast feedback loops, the better. So if you can get something to happen, and I'll show slides in a couple of weeks on a ventilating dehue job that we did with a environmentally sensitive client. The install had some crazy spikes going, but it was pretty spiky before that. And we get it in, we get the fresh air working, we get the house dry, and the VOC is flatline. And like in 2 days, we knew visibly by measuring that we had made a difference. And that was super exciting, because that was the first time that we'd done that. We had 3 FUBOTs in the house, one on the basement, one on the first floor, one on the second floor. And that client said he was sleeping better, and he had a CO2 monitor as well. And we dropped his CO2 levels in his bedroom from 1200 to 600 or even 550. Like there's all of these things. So we made his life a lot better. Now, those are super advanced projects that honestly, environmentally sensitive clients are really, really hard, really hard. So I don't recommend going down that path. But if you want to learn, they're a hell of a learning curve.
I want to reiterate too, the key there is measuring stuff.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of guys want to guess, a lot of guys want to blue light solutions for whatever problems, and they're not measuring, they're just guessing and assuming those things are going to be solved. Yeah. You know, so the few of my clients where we've done fresh air stuff, they bought a air quality monitor and started measuring before. That was my suggestion before we started fixing things or screwing things up potentially.
We never do that. What are you talking about? Let's give them the blue light special.
Right. Cash that commission check.
kind of to drive that home is what you said there, Tim, is measuring, but who's responsible for measuring and who's paying for that measuring? So
100%. Yep.
That's something that we don't want to do for free.
Yeah.
Because you do things for free, then people don't buy. So, and you're wasting your time. And again, 100%. That goes back to that hero mentality. So those recommendations, those offer declines, as Nate hit on earlier, is very, very key.
Yeah, and it's
I-
not just for the sales either. If the homeowner doesn't want the testing and you do it for free, they're not going to value that. They're like, we don't give a shit. And so it doesn't lead to anything. Like the only reason you're ever going to do anything is if the homeowner wants you to. So it all comes down to you only want to be paid for it because you want them to value what you're doing. Because anything anybody's ever been given for free, they're like, well, if you're just willing to give it for free, it's probably not worth a shit. And they're probably right. If you're just handing it out for free, it's probably not worth a shit. Like, if mints were expensive, they wouldn't give it to you, when you leave a restaurant for free. Like that's just here, go away, you smell funny. If the whole point is, and it kind of also goes back to the Sandler book, if you read that book, it just comes down to kind of extracting pain is what it's called. But what it really is unveiling the bullshit. When you talk to somebody and say, hey, like if you just, have diarrhea of the mouth and just spew all these different tests and all this bullshit you can do, they're not really going to care because they can't relate to what does that do for me.
And a confused mind says no.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're trying to solve a problem, if we're, okay, there's an obvious issue and in your mind you're going, well, I can obviously probably fix this with bringing in some fresh air, but I need to test some things and verify some stuff. Well, she doesn't, the homeowner who's a single mother, has kids, she doesn't give a shit about all these testing that you want to do to make yourself feel better. But if you can kind of relate that to, well, you have some issues and we kind of don't really know where we should go from here. But what we can do is we can do a little bit of testing and then we can both kind of uncover some things and give us a good idea of where to go from there. And so it's kind of setting this up of, we're doing this with a purpose and this is going to help us alleviate this, problem that she has, whatever this problem is.
And understand what the path might look like too.
Yes, exactly. And that's the whole point, is finding that path and finding where does it best lead for them.
Yep.
And if we also want to go,
what's
Yeah,
it
go
worth
ahead.
to fix it?
Yep.
exactly. And that's what I was about to go into, of going back of,
Sorry.
if you start, oh, you're good. If you go back to like we were saying with experimenting on your own house, when you do that, put yourself in a homeowner's shoes and think, okay, as you're doing these things, when you're doing all this science experiment stuff, put a number of to how much you would charge somebody to do this same type of work. See what that number is and go, would I be willing to pay this number to have what it is that I just done? If the answer is no, and it probably is, then you got to start to figure out, okay, what would it be worth? How do you start pulling stuff out? And then you start to realize, okay, just because I can make the perfect solution doesn't mean anything, because 99.9% of the time, I'm never going to actually utilize that.
Yep.
You're going to be doing something in the middle. And so you have to go, okay, and that's why we like, pressurization with just bringing in fresh air to the return when possible, because it's a cheap, effective, it's the best value. Technically, if we want to talk about value, it's the best value. And so put ourselves in the perspective of understanding what is this process and this path for the homeowners, and how does that actually come out to anything? Because we don't do anything ever if they don't see the reason why, and if they don't say go for it. Like, they have to understand that. And so if you can't convey that message, here's something that's going to probably piss some people off, but if you have all these tools and you have the ability to do all this fancy testing, but you don't do it because nobody buys it, it's not them. It's not the market that you're in. It's not that there's something about these people and they don't understand my special testing. No, it's because you fucking suck. You suck at your job. You can't do it. You can't allow yourself to get to the point to actually use the tools. So we can either look at extreme ownership, read that book about 5 times, and then you'll start to go, okay, well, maybe it is my fault. Maybe I can come up with something to go, okay, maybe if I change this thing, if I communicate this better, if I do this, I do that, then you'll start realizing, oh, I can do these jobs. I was just stupid then, and I wanted to blame everybody else.
And this is why we keep Tanner around right here. And I think you need to change your name there to Tyler Durden, because we also call him Tyler sometimes. That was a good rant.
It goes back to having that adult-to-adult conversation.
Thank you.
To figure out what someone wants. You can't just go in and assume. Like, you were saying, Tanner, you just can't go in and assume. And I'm going to do all this testing, and I'm going to look like this magical person that just throws these numbers everywhere to no avail. It's pointless. So again, having the conversation, figuring out what those concerns are, those issues are, and then being able to convey that in a manner that they understand. And that's exactly what our process does.
Educate and offer options. That's all it is. There's no coercion anywhere. Ask questions. Let me know what you think about this and that. Okay, that means we could probably do this, or we can do this. Here's your odds. Here's your prices. What works best for you? And you just keep doing that one step after another. I mean, it can, or sorry, Inigo tonight. I didn't kill your father, dude. Just letting you know. I mean, I remember you saying this is the most ethical process that you've ever used.
Yeah, no pressure. Not forcing anybody to buy anything. We often equate our method to what a doctor does. And I'm sorry, I stepped out for a minute because of the dog. I don't know if the expression has been mentioned that prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. So when we go to the doctor for a consultation, and if he wants to perform tests, we ask him to explain it. Why do I need it? What's it going to cost? Is my insurance going to cover it? How much am I going to be responsible for? And then the patient has to decide, oh, nope, I'm just going to live with it. I don't want chemotherapy. I'm just going to go ahead and live with it.
Yep. Give people their options and let them choose. Our only responsibility is to explain their options to our own satisfaction. There's no way to control their satisfaction, but we can, if you leave the house and you're like, I did a good job explaining that, then that's the bar that we have to hit.
For Sandler, what's that, the I and the R?
Oh, I don't remember that piece.
Might have to have TK come in. We've got our...
Yeah, the I and the R. The
Yeah.
I being your identity, R being your role.
There we are.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Yep.
So if we're beating ourselves up because we're not selling anything, is it because, as has been said, maybe we're just not presenting what we have to offer, and if they don't value it, we're either not presenting it properly or they just don't want it. Step back and re-examine. Make sure we're doing our due diligence.
And even more so on that, because here's a scenario that somebody would throw out, be like, oh, well, you don't understand. The type of clients I have, none of them have any money. And so then the question is, okay, so do you run a charity? Probably not. Well, if they don't have any money, which is a terrible situation, you can't do these expensive jobs because it's not cheap to fix a house. It's not. And so if all of your clients are extremely poor and they can't pay for that, but you want to do this building science portion of stuff, it still falls back to you because you're going after the wrong clients. And so, again, even with the doctor analogy, if you go to a doctor and he says, oh, well, you need to do this procedure. If you don't, you probably have 90% chance of dying. What would you like to do? And you go, oh, no, I don't want to do it. Is he going to hold you down and go, okay, we're bringing in the nurses. I don't care what you said. We're going to do it right now because if not, you're going to die. He's going to go, well, I mean, it's kind of stupid, but okay, we'll see you later or not. I don't know.
Not my money, not my problem.
Yep. Yeah, that wonderful Polish phrase, not my circus, not my monkeys. We have to keep that in mind. This is not our house. This is not our problem.
And
we are here to guide them.
Yeah, unfortunately, we judge in the industry, in the HVAC industry, we do judge a lot of people prior to actually getting into having that conversation. So I'll always go back to have that conversation because if you don't build that relationship, then you're just selling yourself short.
Yeah, you don't know. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, Jeff. One of my best friends from college, his dad sold BMWs, and this guy walked in overalls and just stinking, and greasy and just looked gross, and nobody would go wait on him. And my buddy's dad went over and waited on him, and he paid cash for two 750 ILs. He owned a big garbage truck company. And so, yeah, talk about being careful judging a book by its cover. So just ask the questions. And like I fail at that all the time, but like one of the best rules of life, which I really suck at personally, I need to work at, is live by Jeopardy rules. Everything has a question mark on the end.
I'd like to buy a vowel. Oh, wrong game show. Sorry.
Also, stay in your compartment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's if anybody wants to look that up, that's called the Sandler submarine. So you start with, well, it's rapport building to really begin, but then you figure out what their pain is, what problems they want to solve, and you work through that, and then you move to budget. And you might go back and forth through the hatch a couple of times, but once you get to a compartment and you're going to stay there, close that door and then keep moving on. If you start skipping steps or messing around, your odds of success fall off a cliff. And
Start with you can't teach a kid to ride a bike.
Yep.
Start there.
Yeah, and that'll totally get you there. So any other fresh air stories we want to tell this week? We can certainly save some for later because I think the ERV stories need to wait till next week. Anybody done any sucking and had it not work?
I have a client with a chemical sensitivity who designed her own system and put a bath fan in every room, thinking that would somehow help her. Every room.
I don't remember every. Holy crap.
Did you install those, Tim?
I did not install
Did you
those.
install those? Come on now.
I did not install those. But she had me she wanted me to do some blower door testing and stuff like that. I didn't install those. She went against the guidance of several people and designed her own system. And in the end, her house is unlivable. This house she built from the ground up, she's turned it into a place where she can't even function. And, and that's all sucking, and it's a brand new house. So yeah, so that's for one situation where it's definitely not worked.
She was in a humid climate, I take it?
No, she's in, well, I mean, I'm in Pennsylvania, so we're a green grass.
Oh yeah.
But not, I wouldn't say as bad as, Tanner's area or Florida or anything.
Yeah, I mean, there's been multiple occasions that I've ran into as well where certain families put in exhaust fans, kitchen exhaust hoods, range hoods, 600, 800 CFM, that have done the same thing that you're talking about there, Tanner, or Tim. So, and where it's unlivable, where every day when they're cooking, they're sucking everything out of the house, and the house just can't stay comfortable.
Oh, so you can't just put the biggest fan you can find in?
No, that's what they thought.
Huh.
They thought
I don't know why that didn't work.
It was our new system that we put in.
No smells in the kitchen though, right?
Yeah, actually, it was more stank.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a couple of weeks, I've got some pictures to show of a range hood that doubles as a blower door. Because it got darn near to blower door pressures with it running.
Wow.
So that was interesting.
I think of all the people that like, all the contractors that like to brag about, oh, in my house, I've got a 1600 CFM hood and I run it through an ERV because I'm smart.
I've
Because
heard
it dehumidifies.
Yeah.
who was it? It was Terry. Why can't I think of Terry's last name? He's like Joe Stiebrick, only really nice, and he looks like Doc from Back to the Future, just like big white hair. But he said he got a call to a house in Chicago where the house had turned into a mold farm. and Terry, you only get to him after you get through a lot of websites. He's not that easy to find. He's like the A team. And they call him out there, and hear what it was. It was a large older house, like 5,000, 6,000 square feet in Chicago, think the Home Alone house. And they had hired a personal chef, and they were running the range hood, which was like 1,500 CFM, and they were running it 6-8 hours a day in a humid climate. And it basically rotted the house out. So yes, sucking can cause so many issues. And then he told a story of another one where it was a hotel in Hawaii that had the same problem. The kitchen was heavily negative, so they hadn't figured out the makeup air for it, and that was causing all kinds of mold inside. It was like a Hilton or something like that. I mean, it was a big name brand hotel. So yeah, just be careful sucking, especially sucking hard.
Yeah, gents out there, careful with your sucking. Just because you can make a ton of money doing the sucking doesn't mean you should.
All right. Well, that seems like as good a place as to end of this week's night. So next week we get to go explore Samuel L. Jackson, and how if you don't need him to describe how cold your winters are, you don't need an ERV. So tune in next time. That's going to be a fun one, where this was a little bit more conceptual, that we're going to show a bunch of stuff. So that'll be interesting. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming.
See you guys.
Good night.
See you.
And by the way, you know the drill. Bell, subscribe, all that crap. Later. See you next week.